And our first speaker is Elizabeth Thompson-McRae from the University of St Andrews in the UK. So Elizabeth, if you're ready, let's have a go at sharing a screen.
Okay, let's do it. Can can you see that okay?
I can see you in the
Oh,
kind of author view, so you need to switch
oh,
to the window that's got your presentation. That's it. I can see your first
there,
slide.
we're good. And
And we're
now
off.
I can't see anybody now. So let's just kick things off. So I'll get into who I am in a minute, but just to kind of preface this presentation, so this is going to be using Microsoft Power Automate to catalog records. But just to preface that, as a means of introduction, the purpose of today's session is to provide a high-level overview in successfully utilizing Microsoft Power Automate to provide a practical solution to the challenge of generating catalog descriptions at scale for similarly structured record sets. I won't be providing a step-by-step walkthrough of building the flow, as Microsoft has a range of accessible online content that can do a much better job than I can. But instead, I'll be sharing the details of this at the end of the presentation, and I'll put the links to what I used in the chat afterwards. Okay, so just to kick off who I am, I'm Elizabeth. I am the digital archivist for the University of St Andrews, and I work within the archive and rare books team. And my role operates across our muniment and manuscripts collections. So broadly speaking, that is, muniments is our records that belong to the business function of the university and reflects that history and ways of working through the past 600 years. And our manuscript collections are records that are outside of the university but are relevant and interesting to what we are as a research institution. So that can also include local interest as well as further afield. So I am an archivist, but I'm really new to the role of digital preservation. In my previous roles, I've worked with traditional paper-based systems, but now I'm now nearly 2 years with the university. My primary role is to manage a cultural change from paper to digital to maintain our 600-year legacy into the future. So just to kind of really lay it on thick and to give confidence to people that might be nervous about using automation in their workflows for digital preservation, I just want to really underline the fact that I'm not a computer engineer, I'm a computer science expert or a highly experienced coder. So, but I am able to yield really good results with the existing skills that I have. And I would like to talk through my process and how I went around doing that. So again, just to underline, what I am not, but I am an archivist, curious and comfortable with trying new things and failing. And what I mean by that is, as a profession, we all have the skills needed to analyse the requirements for records that we need to preserve and then use tools to map the services and tools and services that we need to link in with, as well as identifying any gaps or areas for improvement within our existing and emerging governing structures. So around that, around the kind of the concept of comfortable with trying new things and failing, that is very much a partnership, and I want to kind of outline that to any managers that are potentially out there who look after staff, that having a culture that allows staff to try new things and potentially fail is a really important component in developing skills and transitioning from theoretical discussions to tangible and practical solutions around implementing automation in an ethical and controlled way for preserving digital records. So Just to set out the context of why this all came about for me. Um, Pre-COVID, the university changed from a paper to a digital organization. This happened in a very, very short period of time. So 600 years from when the university started till roughly pre-COVID, it very much was a paper-based function across the university. We have a whole archive with paper in a different range of formats that evidence a whole range of activities that the university undertakes. And then as COVID happened for a lot of other places, necessity drove the fact that paper just wasn't sustainable anymore. We had to switch to a digital environment very rapidly. So, as part of that, within that kind of global context, one set of records that made that transition from paper to digital were exam papers. So, prior to that change, every year around under 1,000 paper copies of the exam papers that were issued across university for both semesters of teaching was transferred to the archive on an annual basis. During this digital transformation, that stopped being paper and became digital. But as with everything, there was been a bit of a lag in catching up with that backlog of content. So at the moment, I'm currently sitting with papers that go back to 2019 to 20, so about 5 years worth. So times that by 1,000, we've got 5,000 exam papers. So that's one record set out of many that I manage that I need to catalogue and make available. And as you can imagine, that isn't going to take 2 minutes for me to do. So the challenge was, that when dealing with this backlog, we're working in an environment that is really restricted in terms of what we can and can't do when introducing potential risk for IT, which is understandable. We all know that in the current climate, cybersecurity is not a case of if it will happen, when it will happen, and particularly for high value, high target institutions such as St Andrews, this is something that the university takes really seriously and takes steps to try and reduce that risk as much as possible. So because of that really tightly controlled system, I wasn't able to experiment with open source software that many of other people within different organizations might be able to use to experiment with. So I had to very much kind of go back to, well, what can I use? What do I have to my availability? And then be able to kind of look from that point onwards as to what might or might not be possible. But also within that context, we work already as an archive in a very small team. I work closely with my Minimum colleague and myself as part-time member of staff. So I work 3 days a week. So we're talking about one record set that already has a backlog of 500 records. You can imagine that at scale, how that really starts to add up and, trying to manage those resources. I'm sure everybody else, particularly in higher education, budgets have been cut. We don't have the same amount of spending that we maybe even had last year. So trying to do what we can with what we have and demonstrate that value to then be able to find a way forward is really critical. So actually getting into what I did. So as I said in the previous slide, rather than trying to look to solutions that just aren't available to me because of different restrictions, be it resourcing, the IT environment, etc., I started to look at what I actually did have. So the university is a signed up member of Microsoft 365. And as part of that, we have access to Microsoft Copilot, which is um, the artificial intelligence kind of side of Microsoft, and also Power Automate, which is the capability to use a low or no code environment to start building automated workflows to make things more efficient. So, as part of that, I then started to look at the gaps in my skill set, in what I could do with Copilot and Power Automate, and what I could maybe do about that. So when it first kind of really was fully embedded into university, I'll be fully honest and say that, beyond having a rough idea of the whole chat GPT revolution that was going on, and Microsoft's kind of equivalent to that, which is Copilot, my knowledge was really limited. So I started to look at what Microsoft had on offer in terms of training, and I saw there was a 1 day online course that I could attend, called Building Automation. I had no kind of preconceived fixed idea of what that might be. So I just went with an open mind and thought, well, if I can take away one thing that is mildly useful, then that would be a win. So having attended the course, the example that was used was a fictitious finance department needed to extract key information from a range of invoices and then be able to use that information in a pre-populated template. And the training automated that, so that the solution was a training environment was created with a range of different invoices in different formats that then were tagged with key fields of information that needed to be extracted. And then the environment and training model learned from that and was able to then start producing pre-populated templates with the required information, saving the team a lot of time. And already I'm sure that you can see there is a lot of crossover with the context that I described in my previous slide around the challenge of cataloguing exam papers. So after the training, I could really start to see the value in investing a little bit of time in starting to really play around with the capabilities of what Power Automate can do. Again, it's designed as a low or no code platform, so that it really is for users who have no training in coding to be able to start typing in prompts and then building a workflow from there to then achieve a desired outcome. So as part of that, I then started to really think about, well, what am I trying to achieve in terms of wanting to catalogue the exam papers? And then, as I kind of said in my previous slide, we all have the skills that we apply in our job to understand what we need to do in terms of what we're trying to achieve as an outcome and the steps that are required to be able to do that, which also takes into consideration potential access issues, if there's data protection, legislative and statutory requirements. So we already do that as part of our job whenever we're handling records. And it was being able to, apply that in an automated environment. But as part of that, I also worked really closely with our Muniments archivist to take into consideration the required fields and format that we would need for a template to eventually populate our EMU catalogue. That's an Axial piece of software that we use for St Andrews, which covers museums as well as archives for handling content for future access. So I was able to establish as part of that the essential, the enhanced features, and then the nice to have information. And then from that, I was able to then produce a workflow and build that from there. So as part of this process, some of the pitfalls that I had to consider was around whether the information that I'd be building into this automated environment would be safe. So it wouldn't be then being processed to build models outside of the university. So within the university, Microsoft 365, they have a license that means that when if they're developing any putting any prompts into Copilot or building any training environments or processing any data, the data is held within the university system as opposed to going outside of that kind of closed system and then being used to then build Microsoft's training environments. So that's something to really kind of think about in terms of sensitivity and information handling and the potential impact of any automation that you're utilizing as to whether there are any risks or whether the information that you want to be processed could end up being out in the wild and being used in a way that you hadn't intended. And once it's out there, you can't get it back. So really kind of thinking about that early on is really important. Another kind of major thing is cost versus benefit. So for me, this made sense to develop a workflow and take a little bit of time to develop because I knew that this would be an ongoing process. The volume of content that I need to be dealing with every year and the expectation for providing access made sense to spend a little bit of time to develop this. But if it was a different type of record, for instance, I was getting like 10 a year, that wouldn't make sense in terms of the cost. In terms of staff time to develop and process, it would be quicker for an experienced cataloger to go away and do that rather than going through automation. Again, data sensitivity, that's something that I've touched on, but it's something that you need to be thinking at the start of developing any workflow, regardless of whether it's automation or not, is these kind of potential risks and how you handle information and the appropriateness of security and who you may need to call in as expertise to ensure that you have the right systems in place, whether it's physical or digital. And I think also another thing to really underline is don't underestimate the quality assurance. For me, when I'm developing any workflow, there would never be a point in any kind of automated workflow, no matter how good it was, that there wouldn't be an aspect of quality assurance at the end of it, be it light touch or in depth. I think that one of the kind of the key issues with automation is when humans take their hands completely off the wheel and are not engaged in the process whatsoever, and there's no checks and balances in place. So just kind of really underlining that. And also just in terms of being really clear about what you want. So going back to that, developing that workflow, that Copilot and Power Automate are fantastic, but the wheels can start to come off if you don't really understand what you're wanting to achieve. And then as a result of that, you're putting in vague or unclear commands for Power Automate to start to build a workflow. It can lull you into a false sense of security. So it's better for you to understand what you're wanting to achieve and then be mindful and think of co-pilots as an enthusiastic assistant that needs active management and oversight. So just having that in the back of your head when you are doing anything with automation. So just to kind of speak quickly about the flow itself. So this is what it looks like in Power Automate. If I clicked into any of these modules, I would be able to see the code behind it, but this is a high level overview and this is what it would look like for a user. So this is what I mean by a low or no code environment. So the workflow is when a file is created, so that means when a file is put into a pre-designated folder, the flow gathers that file content, and then at the same time, it's able to extract the file name and then through the predict module, it's able to extract tagged information and then put that into a row in a table. So what that looks like in practice is, in terms of the input, for each individual exam paper, the file name looks like this. It's a PDF file, and it basically has the module code. And then on the first page of each of the PDF exam papers, it has in different formats, but kind of roundly the same, this key information. So you've got your file name, you have the school, you have the module title, the module code, what year it was taken in, and semester. And sometimes there may be a resit or kind of something, additional information that makes the paper special that you would want to note in a catalogue that would provide enhanced access. So the blue boxes are the tagged fields that I have trained my environment to look for, with key field names that are then extracted into a spreadsheet. So what that looks like behind is, through the AI Hub, I have an AI model, and I'm able to edit that model, tag the fields and retrain, do a quick test and publish. This probably won't mean that much in kind of like looking at this on a screen, but it will with like the training. So I've put into this model 20 different exam papers, and I have a good result, which means that hopefully that will have a lower error rate. But as part of that, when I build the flow, I want to be able to then make any corrections and re-upload the spreadsheet each time to improve the output, so that the QA becomes a lighter touch and less of an intervention. So when this is being extracted, this is what it will come out as in an Excel spreadsheet, a line here. So, and this is the result. So this is just a snippet because it's quite a long slide, but this will then be used as a template that I'll then upload into my catalogue. So this then extracts all the key information that I wanted out of my module, out of my training environment, to then provide a detailed catalogue for future access. So just to kind of really underline that this is an iterative process along with QA. This is something that will be a constant work in progress. As with any kind of quality assurance, your work is never done, and the more that you put into that, with whilst balancing cost and benefit, the greater that the output is. But again, it's always balancing that benefit versus kind of reward concept. So for next steps for me is to, I want to establish this as a solid proof of context to then have discussions with my colleagues in IT to then see how we can then develop other workflows for different record sets to then be able to kind of improve the efficiency of what I have already, and really be able to demonstrate that cost benefit analysis to kind of demonstrate to kind of decision makers and leaders that it's worth spending the money to kind of look into this further. And in terms of kind of making the process better, I would like to add an API that's a connector that allows me to use a PDF tool to only look at the first page as opposed to 5 pages of an exam paper, which will then reduce the amount of credits that I'll be using. So that will reduce the cost, because at the moment the model is looking through 5 pages for each PDF, when in reality all I'm extracting is the information on the first page. So that's something that I can already see as an improvement. And as I kind of described in the other slide, I want to build another API to be able to keep adding more information to my model so that any mistakes are corrected and the model learns from that, so it improves the efficiency each time it's run. And these are the training tools that I use. They're free to access, and I will put links to the content in the chat for anybody that's interested. But it's really just to get out there and try these things, and you'll be surprised about the crossover and what can be done. Anyway, thank you, and I'll take any questions at the end of the presentations from everybody else.
Okay. Well, thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for getting us off to a great start. Um, but yeah, we do have a couple of minutes for questions. If anybody has anything pressing or a comment they'd like to make, um, feel free to think. We can probably try. Oh, Abigail is coming in from the UKRI. Abby, do you want to give it a go?
Hi, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that presentation. It was really interesting. I just had a question about the Copilot version that you used. Did you use the Copilot chat, so the one that the enterprise version that comes free with M365, but still is enterprise contained, so they don't share the data externally? Or did you use actually the paid license, the Microsoft 365 Copilot paid license, which I can't
So
remember how much it is per
it's
person?
it's a paid license, and so Copilot is good for kind of developing that kind of um, I guess kind of thinking through things and providing responses, but it's really limited in terms of being able to process anything. So it can only kind of like handle 10 files at a time. Power Automate is where you build the flows to be able to do things at scale. And although when I first started this, an IT kind of came to me and said, we've got all these credits that are being used. What happened? And I explained to them what I was doing. I now have an enhanced license, but prior to that, I just had a standard license. But it's a paid for
Okay, so
version,
that's
and that allows the university kind of across the whole of organization, like across the whole of the organization, to keep the data within that kind of data sphere. Does that answer the
yeah, no,
question?
that's great. Yeah, I think no, that was just a question I was having because I believe you can use both versions to help in Power Platform, but I wasn't
You can,
100%
yes,
sure.
yes,
But obviously the Copilot chat version, it can't access your own files and your own emails and that
yeah.
kind of thing.
Which is what you
Different,
need for
even
something
though
like this. Yeah,
even if you're using the enterprise version where it's not being shared, it's not being used for training Copilot externally. So
yeah.
I was just curious to know which one. Thank you so much.
Well, perhaps whilst people are having a quick thing, Elizabeth, I can reveal my immense ignorance of the Microsoft world amongst my even broader ignorance. Okay, so having created this sort of workflow, this tool, can you share it? Can you share it with other people, or is it very much something you can only run either within your account or within St Andrews, or what? Could I benefit from what you've done?
So that's not so I haven't kind of played around with exporting the workflow. Like I'm pretty sure that it would be something that you could do, but obviously it's kind of it's not agnostic. It's like for Microsoft kind of that would it's but yeah, I think that's something that could be done, because I have an enhanced environment and I'm now working with IT. They can see it and we can work together on it, which is great. And it's like anything within like the Microsoft sphere, you can control who accesses that, so you can share that with other people, and then you can like kind of add editing rights or viewing rights. So it very much works in the same principle as you would if you were kind of having a team site or you wanted to share a document. You can control who can see it and who can do what the actions that can be taken within that. But yeah, I'm pretty certain that you probably could export that as a workflow.
Okay, thanks. Everyone's still being a little bit coy, so I'll ask just one more. Um, so when it comes to your kind of cost benefit analysis, as much as you've thought about it, perhaps at the moment, are there particular things that you think will count more with your senior managers? Is it sort of like, is it just efficiency? Is it consistency? Is it basically saving in staff time, or what?
Well, at the moment, the university is having a major push to look at automation to take away a lot of the processes that are very manually intensive, because when there is a lot of kind of human input, that's not error free, right? When you're having to kind of deal at scale of like thousands of records, like I'm just thinking in registry, if that you're manually having to kind of update, a couple of thousand student records for a certain field, if you could automate that, while you need to still have the quality assurance checks, that is a more efficient use of your time and your staff's time to then be able to do like help students with inquiries and provide a better overall service. So I think it's a kind of a bit of, you know, taking away a lot of like the manual steps where you can, so that you can then focus on providing like the more quality areas of the role that you might not be able to invest in. And also, yeah, of course, like saving money. I mean, what organization isn't interested in that? I mean, that is definitely something that we, you know, are kind of as an organization, as well as anywhere, like looking to save money where we can. But it, you know, in terms of like the archive, the goal is to provide access to our users, and if we can do that in a way that adds value and a sustainable way that's ethical, and we're not kind of putting at risk information by taking corners, or, you know, not providing that kind of thinking about where information is being processed or what steps need to be taken to, you know, if something's highly sensitive, then you would treat that differently whether it was paper or digital anyway, but it's just kind of enhancing your role. Like I'm not worried about my job being redundant like in 12 months time. Like we're trying to grow a digital, like we're managing a cultural shift from paper to digital is only going to increase, and you know, we need to be using these tools as a necessity.
Thanks. I agree. Yeah, I just, in case anyone's worried about being put out of a job, that's not your main purpose. So I'll stop rambling. Thank you again, Elizabeth, for getting us off to such a good start.